Is this the year you want to grow your business? Do you want to expand your team? Build a new office? Hey, it's Tug, and I want to tell you about First Liberty Building and Loan. Aren't you exhausted by going to lenders, building a relationship, and a week later, you're dealing with a new person? You won't have to with First Liberty Building and Loan. The Frost family has been helping businesses grow since the 90s, and they can help you too. They know the patterns, they know the ebbs and flows, and they know business. Now the Frost family wants to know you. FirstLibertyGA.com. Buying a building, buying a franchise, or expanding. Reach out and spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them and if they're a fit for you. FirstLibertyGA.com. By the way, if you're a young banker and you want to work with a team that's faith-friendly with a culture of excellence, First Liberty might be a good match. Reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan at FirstLibertyGA.com. That's FirstLibertyGA.com.
The percentage of the population with sensory needs has grown exponentially over the past couple of years. These kids and parents are put in really tough situations on a daily basis. In this episode, we talked to Dan Vasquenza of Kulture City, one of the leading advocates for change in this space that's helping venues all over the country make it easier and more accessible for everyone to join in the fun. We talk about marketing, NIL, and we talk about other ways to get the word out about such an important cause. All that and more on this episode of The Marketing Madmen.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turn it over to the Marketing Madman with Nick Constantino and Trip Job.
Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here live from the Battery. And we got an interesting topic today.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to get into a lot of things. We're going to talk a little bit about sports. We're going to talk a little bit about culture and society. And fortunate to have Dan Vasquenza, who is an entrepreneur. Vasquenza. Okay, I got it. And ultra runner. I want to hear a little bit about that. And speaker, activist, and co-author of A Fatherless Curiosity that was released last summer. So welcome, Dan.
Yeah, lots happened since I left the Hawks.
There you go.
We'll talk a little bit about basketball too, I think. So.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Having a career in, as you know, Nick, radio for 19 years. To finally make it in the studio and talk about things that are going on.
There you go.
It's super exciting.
There you go.
So appreciate you guys having me today.
Yeah. And I think, let's frame this. So I think give the quick bio of yourself, because what I really want to start talking about is start with Kulture City and talk about, because it is such a unique space. And I think a lot of times it's really hard to put a tangible benefit on what community organizations and charities do, but this is such a tangible thing to see the venues, the Fox Theater, and the venues that have used some of these things. So before we get there, talk about your background, set yourself up for how you got to Kulture City, and then I want to really focus on that.
Yeah, let's not talk about the running stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure it's got some impact. I'm sure it's got something to do with it. Patience, eternal patience is a good part of ultra running.
The exciting part is how you just set that up, Nick. It's getting a chance to talk about our mission, our services at Kulture City. To answer your question, I was very fortunate, and I just mentioned it earlier, to be part of the Atlanta Hawks organization during a time when there was a lot of transformation. And you saw it physically when they took Phillips Arena and it became what it is now today at State Farm Arena, and that whole fan experience has changed. We went from having 2 experiences for a fan.
Yeah,
you want a club seat, or you want to get a stackable seat.
Freaking barbershop, and a Top Golf in there.
Yeah,
dozens.
You could only walk around 2/3, so you couldn't get in. Well, why can't I walk through there?
And just a fan experience, I'll say I was at the Tool concert a couple of weeks ago, and I was in our concert club seats, and the speaker is literally blasting you in the face. And Maynard comes out and he goes, "All right, everybody, put your phones away." You go, "You don't know how bad your phones are for you. Take a journey with us." And I'm like, "Okay, Maynard." Put my phone in my pocket and just stood there and stared at the speaker, and it was the craziest experience I've ever. I won't talk about why it was so crazy or the things I did to get myself to that state, but that venue is an unbelievable place across the board, and it was cool for you to see that, because it went from like a 2 to a 10, which is crazy to see, I'm sure.
So well said. And Concert Club is a great way to experience a show. You got that dead-on look.
Oh, my God.
And just the way the audio funnels into that area is incredible. So I bring it up because that's what became the introduction for me to Kulture City. And at the time, when you talked about diversity and inclusion, it isn't on the steroids it is now. It didn't exist. Yeah. That whole topic for corporations, diversity and inclusion, there was no titles for it.
Yeah.
Now every company has it.
Yeah.
And, Steve Koonin was, the guy that could see the future. He was the one that could, project things, as we've talked about, the experience with a fan. But at the time, he decided to hire Zing Shaw. So Zing was the first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer ever in sports, right here in Atlanta. Pretty cool. So, I mean, this was, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
One of the pillars for the Hawks, as Steve was rebranding, was, what does diversity and inclusion mean? How do we go about that? Because that was a pillar to the organization.
And to be fair, I think it is one of the worst misused words that there is in society today, that they use it as a catch-all, but in the wrong way. Because if you use it as a catch-all the right way, there are so many people that fit the diversity, okay? But if you use it in the way it's been politicized, it is looked at as a negative thing. And I think it's a damn shame. And I think, I don't want to go into the details, but as we frame this, just make sure you explain diversity, inclusion, and how it's relevant to Culture City. Because I think it's a politicized, stigmatized word, unfortunately.
And the other thing to add, and you probably will do this, is my understanding of what Steve did was not only the effort, but was it inward focused or was it outward focused? And I think a lot of companies only think inward focused.
So well said, Trip. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole... It's not so much about what's in the four walls as what's happening outside those four walls. What's the data telling you, and how do we respond? Ultimately, the Hawks were talking to their own customer base, or they outgrew it at a certain point, and that needed to be the shift. And the shift from DE&I is, what you teed up there, Nick. At the end of the day, it's education. Mm-hmm. The ones that are purposeful, the ones that have that meaning, and truly can, make that part of their culture in other ways, are going to have success in that area. And there's some that are educated on it and doing it the right ways. We can talk about a lot of great corporations, and maybe we will before we finish today. But right, Nick, there's some. Not everyone bats 1,000. Yeah, and so we'll keep it there.
And look, so to be fair, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in my experience, equity is the hardest one. So diversity is very easy. There's not a person on earth that doesn't say we want diverse. Everyone wants inclusion, right? And some sports have done a poor job. I'm not going to say blame the NFL, but the barrier to entry to be involved in the NFL, to go to a game, is so high, right? Is so high. So diversity, equity is a hard one. It's hard for people to explain. It's hard to understand. And that's when you start getting into past experiences and what they've led to now. That's the murky one. So for the sake of right now, I think for this conversation, let's keep the word equity out of it. Let's just talk about how to make it inclusive so everybody has a chance to experience the same thing. And I think that will remove some of the stigmatization and politics out of it. Agree?
Agreed.
Okay, let's roll.
So
D&I. Diversity and inclusion. Screw you guys. D&I. We're coming up with our own things. Keep going.
Well, that's where I got introduced to Culture City. This was in 2017 when I was with the team. And Zing Shaw partnered with Culture City, and we went through, as part of what we do at venues, is training. So as a staff member, I went through the training in 2017, and I was like, wow, what is this?
So set it up now. Set up Culture City, what they do, and what because again, it's unique, but when you think about it, it's insanity that it hasn't been done for 50 years. It is insanity that it has not been done with. Now, you explain it first, and then we'll dive into it. What do they do?
So when we partner with venues, we're starting to grow now in some of the services that we do. But as we are on the topic of venues and where I got introduced to them, is when we partner with them, it's training. We train the staff how to welcome these individuals, proper language, things to look for, clues.
And set up the
it's
people
all
don't know
about
anything.
fan experience.
It is about though people with sensory that have something that they cannot experience the same way, either noises or video or the way they interact with people. There's so many people on so many different spectrums that have these problems. So set that up. Give an idea who the person that Culture City looks to make it more inclusive and equitable. Who is that person?
Yeah, you nailed it. Sensory needs is kind of the umbrella. Covers a lot of groups. So when we partner with the venue, we do the training. We provide resources and tools to that venue. Sensory needs bags. I should have brought one. You open it up. It's got the noise reduction earphones, fidget toys, communication cards, two-sided card, how I feel, what I need. They point to it. That's part of the training. So you can check that out at Guest Services to all our partners. We have 1,800 partners now in 6 countries. The time that I went through the training in 2017, we had like 53. So we have really started to scale. And the group of sensory needs, back to Nick's point here, is what happens is the brain is trying to process you were talking about earlier, what happens outside. What is going outside your body? What environment are you in? You need to process that. Now for us, we don't think about it because it's a natural reaction, right? But for some others, there is some steps. and it becomes too overwhelming for them.
You got to think about it like
that they don't go to public places.
My daughter was 4, and I took her to the floor seats of the Hawks, right? It was a lot. And I'm not comparing a 4-year-old, but I'm saying if it's not something you're used to, the sheer overwhelming of that dude's 7 feet tall and he's 2 inches from me is a lot for anybody. So just think about it. Take yourself out of it and look at other people's shoes. You may take it for granted.
My dad's 82, and we've been dealing with his dementia for 10 years. And in the last 2 to 3 years, even at restaurants now, we have to be very careful where we go because for dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera, loud noises just totally. I mean, so you don't even think of that. That's at the other inspector. He loves basketball. He loves things like that.
Frame this to say that it is not a certain kind of person. It is a large group of people who you are making this more accessible towards.
So and we can get into that. The data, we talked about data. We've talked about outside environments. This all rolls to kind of the meaning and the services of what we provide at Kulture City. Now, it was 1 out of 6 3 years ago, individuals with these sensory needs and invisible disabilities. Fall on that spectrum of sensory needs. You talked about one of the groups, Trip. There's probably 25-ish groups, cerebral palsy, dementia, brain injury, autism most common. Mental health is a big one.
PTSD, loud noises.
Stress disorder with our veterans. My son has a rare chromosome abnormality, so rare there's only 60,000 cases reported globally.
Wow.
There's 3 here in Georgia. We're one of them.
Wow.
Same thing. I experienced this as a dad going to a Georgia Tech UGA game when that rivalry was really hot. And he loved the Yellow Jackets. At the time I had an association with that organization, so he'd been to a lot of games. What was different about this game, we were not in a suite. It wasn't a confined area. He was out in the open. I got excited. We're 17 rows off the back of the bench. You'll get to see everything going on, Jack.
Too much.
We didn't even see kickoff, Nick.
Yeah.
He cried, screamed the entire way, not only from the stadium, not only from the football field, but in the car on the ride home. The whole way.
Yeah.
So sorry, here it's your dad.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. We went to a Clemson game last fall, and by chance, we had nosebleed seats because I bought it last minute, right? The best thing in the world because we were literally above the speakers. My dad, he can hiked all the way up there, had no issue, loved seeing the view and all that.
Awesome.
If we had been down more in the bowl, we probably would have made 2 quarters.
You bring up a good point because there's probably people who would be terrified to even walk up to the 400.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. It's such a wide variety, and
Yeah.
sensory is just probably the catch-all. There's probably better words for it.
But it's understandable.
You have 5 senses. Well, there's a 6th sense from what they say, but you have 5 senses for a reason.
But it's neat that, so I understand how I have to work with my dad now, but now that you're bringing this to the venues of understanding all the different, so it's not totally on me. It's not totally on whoever is bringing someone that has those needs.
You got it. You nailed it. And, we talk about the data. And if you're running, if you have an arena or you have an event or a festival, those numbers are huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we've been able to scale is there's recognition. There isn't boots on the ground like me. We've organically grown through word of mouth. Really started with the Hawks. We've got probably 11 to 13 partners here in Georgia and Atlanta. But like I said, we've got 18 throughout the world, 1,800 throughout the world. And it's making a big difference. It's giving these folks an opportunity, but the partners love it because at the end of the day, what they care about is fan experience, right? They don't want someone to have a bad experience. Yeah. And that can be just it.
When we come back, we'll dive in a little bit more to that. But you are listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back.
What are your plans for your business this year? Hey, it's Tug. Do you want to expand and grow? Aren't you exhausted by going to lenders, building a relationship, and a week later, you got a new person to deal with? You have to start all over again? You don't have that with First Liberty Building and Loan. The Frost family has been helping businesses grow since the 90s, and they want to know you. Unlike big banks, they want to partner with you. The Frost family knows the patterns. They know the ebbs and flows. They know business. Get to know them at FirstLibertyGA.com. Building a building, buying a franchise, expanding. Reach out to them. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them and if they're a fit for you. You do that at FirstLibertyGA.com. And by the way, if you're a young banker and want to work with a team that is faith-friendly and has a culture of excellence, First Liberty might be a good match. Reach out to them today. First Liberty Building and Loan. FirstLibertyGA.com. That's FirstLibertyGA.com.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino and Trip Job here, and we got my boy Dan Vasquenza. And, we're talking about sensory needs. We're talking about fan bases. We're talking about capitalism. And one of the things that I have found is when you can bridge a gap for providing a value to a base of people who needs it, but also a way for these institutions to make money and expand their fan base, that's when you're talking win-win. And what I think you guys have done a great job of is you've connected the dots of people who are not connected naturally, right? You've connected the dots of people who were not able to go experience these games, which means they weren't able to achieve the maximum fandom that the teams want. And I think that it has done a great job, and it is in its best form. That's when capitalism works its best. When you are using a for-profit opportunity, allowing people who couldn't go before to come to a game, to serve people who were underserved before. So I think that is a great way to frame why you've been so successful. Now, talk about boots on the ground. Talk about how it's spread. Talk about your interaction with Coldplay. Talk about your interaction with the teams and why it's spread. And then talk about some of the great stories of what you've seen with your own son and how he's been able to experience things. Talk a little bit about that, because I think it'll frame a nice conversation about how charity works and some other things.
Yeah, no, it's great. And when you're getting to capitalism, we are non-traditional. As I mentioned, I'm the only really kind of boots on the ground. We have folks throughout the country, throughout the world, but we're not outreaching. This is organically grown because what's happening in communities, there's a need. Yeah. Unfortunately, something happens and then they realize, ooh, we need that. We're starting now to get ahead of it because people are recognizing. I mean, we're still fairly new. Kulture City is based out of Birmingham, Alabama. It's owned by two doctors who are incredibly brilliant, having built an incredible culture with this thing, and we're changing lives. Oh. But at the end of the day, it's organically grown. It's because there's a need. And now I think we're starting to get ahead of that wave, where in past situations there was a need, something bad happened. The other thing we have not talked about, a lot of our focus is about venues. Our certification training is now starting to grow to train first responders.
Yeah, you're being proactive versus being reactive. Yeah, you're trying to get out ahead of it as opposed to being needed after something already happened.
Look, our partners are helping us with that because they're now having data and experiences of what this is doing. So that's the organic part of what is happening with our growth. It's not really us, reaching out to venues or things like that.
Yeah, now, it sounds like you're getting a place where people can congregate for an experience. I mean, you talked restaurants before and things of that nature, so it doesn't have to be a concert. It doesn't have to be a ball game, et cetera.
Yeah. I mean, anywhere from, a restaurant like we talked about with your dad to Nick teed up. We were talking about Coldplay as we were during the break. Something like that transforms because it's not me. It's above me. It's starting with Chris Martin. The story I understand is the lead singer. He wanted to make all his shows inclusive.
Yeah.
So he went ahead, and I'm sorry I don't know the name of the agency, but he reached out to an agency to come in and take care of the hearing impaired.
Yeah, they do American Sign at all concerts.
It's amazing.
Right. Dozen I've been to, they're doing sign language at every single one. The coolest part is, if you ever watched it, they are actually dancing because the sign is in melody to the music. So they're trying to portray not just the words, they're trying to portray the melody. So it's almost like an orchestra and somebody is using sign language. It's really cool to watch. I mean, again, I won't talk about why I was staring at that person for so long, but I got fixated and was just staring at the person at the concert for like a good 20 minutes because it was more fascinating than the artist and what was going on.
It's amazing. And I'm glad you brought that up. I wish I knew the name of the agency. They're doing great work with Coldplay right now. We were fortunate enough to be a part of that. And that part of that was, hey, we'd like for Kulture City to be with us on tour. So we designated a staff. We invested in a sensory room that we can now inflate and bring with us outside all the venues that they're performing and create that sensory room in that inflatable. And
so that's if it gets too intense, they can come back and be in a place
there you
where
go. They all got badges so they know in and out.
Oh. Wow.
We train the staff. They can recognize that is accessible for them. There's a need for that. And, I mean, it's just changing lives.
Let me ask you.
People are getting to go to a show they never got to go to before.
You got an opportunity recently with the PGA Tour and the Waste Management Open if you haven't approached them.
Yeah. Wrong reason they're sensory is deprived. Let me throw this out there. We don't have to cover it for long. But one of my big understandings what's wrong with policing in this country is that the police are not trained to handle similarly those people that have sensory needs, and they are sending police forces, something that should be handled by someone who's trained, that knows how to calm these people down to make sure. So do you see what the work you have done going other places and helping society? Because I think there's more opportunity for it across this world than people actually realize.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what we've done at venues. Now this is, again, I keep using the word organic, but what's going on with that certification training? Where's this applicable to other things in communities where we live and reside and work?
Companies
Now,
have to imagine training for people, employees,
Yep.
HR. Yeah.
I'm just starting to have conversations here in Georgia with first responders. We have trained, I think to date, over 14,000 first responders. Not one in Georgia. It's coming. And the conversations I'm having with some of these individuals and the chiefs of police, the mayors, let me just pause for a minute. The respect I have for them now is on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
I respected them before.
Yeah.
It's on a whole nother level. On their days off, they're training. The amount of training they have to go through is immense. And it's been hard for us maybe to get some attention because of that. And it makes sense. But it's just another role in the Rolodex. I'm using an old term here. But as they dissect the situation, when they're called to a scene, we're just providing another resource for them to go, okay, this is what's happening. This is not someone on drugs. Right. This is not someone who's dangerous. This is someone who's got a, whatever it might be. It could be dementia. It could be autism.
And you cannot blame the police. They are just forced to make decisions on split second.
It's unreal what they gotta do.
What they are not. That is not part of their job. Is to be out there doing that. They are there to fight crimes. And again, unfortunately, we have put so much burden on police staffs, civil disputes, so much burden on them that having that training, it could probably save lives. It could probably save hours. It could probably save the policeman's sanity. Because what if that officer made the wrong decision at that time? Right. Who does that burden on? We forget about the cops who maybe they made a mistake. We're so perfect. We pay these people $50,000 a year and expect them to be perfect and make perfect decisions. It's insane.
To know everything, right?
It's insane. It's insane. I don't want to talk about it too long, but I imagine the work is going to other places in society.
It's unreal when you pull the curtain back and you get to see what these guys really do.
Right.
And you're right. They're making a huge difference. And the good thing now, Nick, is we're getting data because we have trained in other areas. Salt Lake City, Alabama, Tennessee Highway Patrol.
Wow.
We're starting now to get some of this data back, and I've realized here in Georgia I was going too big. I was talking with Atlanta. I'm talking to Cobb County.
Right.
They all have interest in doing this. There's so much going on. So I think we'll start to see the smaller towns in Georgia be a part of this, and it'll start to bubble up and see where we're getting data and there's a need.
Yeah, it's great. And I think we've done a good job framing just what you do. So let's talk about the business. Let's talk about your interactions with people. Let's talk about how you guys have spread the word and what the next steps are for marketing. Because I know one of the things you want to cover is kind of how NIL has even crept its world into this space. So frame that a little bit. Talk a little bit about what you learned in sports
marketing. It's like Nick's favorite
marketing.
topic, isn't it? He's waiting for his own deal. I
am reading notes that Dan gave me. I want to cover to be a good host.
He's trying to get an NIL.
He's being a great host.
He's trying to get a deal for his daughter. I mean, he's like, when can I get her started?
She's pretty damn good, I'm not going to lie. But talk about how your experience at the Hawks allowed you to work in an institution like this and how you're getting the word out there, because I have to imagine all the experience you've had in marketing is certainly helping here.
It's creating a lot of anxiety for me, I'll be honest with you, because you're right. I look at my background, my experience professionally, and then you look at a cause, something that's so meaningful, not only to me personally with my son, but how it's impacting communities. And I feel like I can't run fast enough. And I want to do those things because we have set up great assets throughout the country. But I've been so excited to talk about what we're doing in Kulture City and all the communities that we're serving right now. But yeah, if we shift, this occurred to me a couple weeks ago, and maybe it's not any brand news, but what is happening is this whole term of NIL, right? Name, image, likeness. As it relates to sports, it's a very popular topic. It's the wild, wild west.
Completely
right
misunderstood still to this day.
Completely misunderstood.
And there's no actual governing body that's giving a clear, concrete. And just so I could throw my 2 cents, your biggest problem with NIL now is the player's likeness is conflicting with the team's likeness. Yes. So like you can pay a high school or a college player, but if they're not wearing the jersey of the school they're at, their name is pretty much worthless. So that's where your fight is who's supposed to get those pools of money. And until the Supreme Court comes in and says that saying I play at the University of Georgia is a statement of fact versus intellectual property, it's going to still be unresolved. And that's the issue right now. It doesn't apply completely to this instance, but I'm just saying that that's where we're going to be. Keep going.
Yeah, and the topic there made me think, with my background and what we do, right? Here it is. There's an opportunity for companies to go, you know what, the NIL really is in service, is really in community. It's really in nonprofit. It's really in purpose. And how do we drive that? And what do we stand for from a value standpoint as a company? And once you identify that, then you can outward look and go, well, gee, that nonprofit's been around for, you tell me any, 15 years, 30 years, 50 years. We want to align with them. And when you align with them, then your values align. Then your purpose aligns. And we know what that does to culture.
Yeah.
We know what that will do when you're outreaching. That knows what that will do internally with your employee base. And then you look at the nonprofits, they've got volunteers. People are giving up their time and providing their energy and resources to make a difference. And when you can attach your brand to that, it's very powerful.
Yeah, if it's done real, because there's a difference between slapping your name to something and from some people who are actually involved. So one of the things I found fascinating, I think the NBA has done a great job at a lot of these things. So give an example. And it's a debate, right? Of course, everything has to be a debate. Kevin Love came out and said that he's anxious. Then this was an all-star. This is what a great basketball player with national championships, that he's depressed. And there's two trains of thought. Half the people are like, oh my God, thank you for speaking up and making people realize that everyone has it. The other people are like, you make $20 million, shut up. And honestly, like, I agree with the first part of this, because anytime you can have somebody that people look up to explain, this is something I go through also, I think it normalizes it, but it also makes people feel more, oh, okay, if he's doing it, then it's okay that I'm doing it. The other side, I think, is completely ridiculous, but that's the issue you're working with. The NBA has been ahead of that curve. How do we get this to other sports and other programs, and how do we get it to high school? I mean, this is going to sound so rude, but like when I was in high school, there were kids, you throw the dodgeballs harder because you didn't know what a sensory needs kid was. It was just, that's not the world. And let's call a spade a spade. The world didn't find those people and help them. It wasn't built to do it. It's only starting now. My mother taught nursery school for autistic nursery school children. It was an immersion program, and she taught gym to those kids, for her whole life. So imagine
She's
at 4 years, and she said the first thing she said, she got to the school, and the school only had autistic kids. And my mom goes, you guys are out of your freaking mind. If you don't do this as immersion, these kids will never grow. And the kids she saw from 4 to 5, how they developed. I remember I was at a Wendy's once with her, and the kid was talking to his mother and like this, just pouty, wouldn't look. My mom jumped across tables to go jump in my mom's arm. So the impact you can make is palpable, but you have to be able to find the people, give them the help they need, and make it so they're still part of society. You can't separate them off automatically. They have to be immersed for this to be successful. So,
a lot to unpack there. When I was growing up, you talked about when you were growing up, they were put in another room. Yeah. You nailed it. It's humanizing, right? It's humanizing what is happening in communities. The NBA is a great example of what they're doing. We can all see that on a global level. And we can say to ourselves, what are they doing on a global level that I can do in my own neighborhood? And that's where it starts.
Yeah.
And you align your own values as a person, as a company, as a leader, and you say, does this make sense for us as an organization? And I think that's where the conversations need to happen.
You're right. Changing the world starts with your local community. If you can help 3 people in your neighborhood and 10 million people do it, you just helped hundreds of millions of people. So I think
and you have to start small a lot of times. I mean, it's not, I think that's probably the toughest part. I think you hit on it, is you can't boil the ocean, right?
There you go. Well, you guys are doing it. If you're helping 3 people today, you're helping 3 people today.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's maybe someone got something out of today they didn't know about, or we got them to think differently, or we got them to remind them and encourage them that what they're thinking is right, go for it.
Yeah, and growth is perpetual and exponential. It starts really slow, but when you get to that inflection curve and it starts going up, it is unbelievable. And most people stop before you get to that parabolic growth, which is a damn shame.
Inflection point.
Yeah, it's an inflection point. Again, the start of the curve. So
kudos to you guys, because you consistently been doing this.
Yeah,
and it's growing.
Yeah.
It started day 1, and then was a day 2, and a couple weeks, and a couple months. You're at a couple years now, so the consistency of what you're doing is really providing, the listenership and the things.
And as much as I love to cherry pick and gloat about our stats. Talk a little bit about a real hero. Talk about Dominique and his involvement with Culture City, and talk about, because again, that is one of the things you need. You need that guy, and an authentic guy
who's got the voice,
a hero. Talk about his involvement and what other people have stepped up. You mentioned Chris Martin from Coldplay. Talk about people who have stepped up to really help this cause.
Well, we talked about humanizing things, and the other thing I think you were talking about, Nick, and Trip, is relatability. When you can get someone at Dominique's statue, there becomes relatability. There becomes, what is that? I'm going to listen. Yeah. Let's just, for a side note, the guy did some amazing things on the court. He is even more amazing since he's retired, and the things he's done in communities. And Culture City is just a pillar of that.
Yeah.
The many things this guy does. Dominique Wilkins is the chairman of our board to Culture City, and if you get a chance, we spell Culture City with a K. .org. Check it out and see our team. You'll see some of those board members. You might recognize some of those board members, from actors to actresses to Imagine Dragons. So there's music involved. There's
I
professional
will
athletes.
side story. When I lived in Vegas, I worked for my first station radio job ever was an alternative rock station in Vegas. How I got my start. They were our opening band for every station event. Imagine Dragons was our opening band, and it's the only time in my life I've ever said these guys will be something. Now their music has changed completely from what it used to be to what it is now. But they opened at least 10 to 12.
So you were holding them back?
I won't go into detail. I won't go into detail of my opinion on the music because they have done great things for everyone around them. But I will just say I thought they were better back then, and I'll leave it at that.
So their drummer Daniel Platzman, who's been very engaged with our nonprofit.
They still play the big drum though. They still slap the big drum in the show. They were doing that
He's
back
from
then.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Platzman,
Is he? They got their start in Vegas. Vegas was their
that's
start.
right. Yeah, the guys, I think, Utah?
Yeah, Provo.
Daniel,
They're from Provo.
There you go. And the convergence happened, and they made the magic in Vegas. That's where Platz lives now, but he grew up here in Atlanta. Huge Dominique fan, hugely great guy that has helped us with inclusion and accessibility with Culture City and the things we're doing in communities. So,
you know what, real quick, and I happened to be with David Dickey a couple weeks ago at an event that it was for Hop on a Cure. And one of the things that I noticed, and I think maybe I'll give you time to talk about Dominique and others, was they kept bringing out more and more acts for this benefit for Hop on a Cure. And I've got to meet Hop a couple times through the station and elsewhere. And the thing that I noticed is as these, Sheryl Crow's guitarist and people from Zac Brown and on, the smiles on their face. And then when they were done, they didn't leave the stage. They just moved to the side. They stayed. This idea of they are so happy to give back for good causes or the community. So, I just experienced that, and that was my takeaway from that event. How does that roll into Culture City and, all these stars, entertainers, et cetera, and how they feel about what you're doing?
That's it. And, we use the word relatable. Some of them on our board have family members or know someone that have a sensory needs. We have some that don't.
Yeah, but it's so pervasive, dude. You said 1 in 6. I bet you those numbers are.
It's 1 in 4 now. You're right, Nick.
It is so pervasive, and we unfortunately have set up a society that makes it worse. Kids staring at video games, how fast cuts go. I mean, shit, I have the worst ADD. Flounder, mark that. I have the worst ADD ever. And again, I'm not saying that I'm sent, but I'm just saying that it has to be so pervasive now that it's touched everybody.
It's touched everybody in some way. I mean, the numbers are big. But back to your question, the things that we do, and I think the word that I thought of as you were talking, Trip, was access. Getting access to these types of individuals, and the celebrities, if you will, and the Dominiques of the world, and they love it. And Dominique's done so much. We celebrate. We do a couple things here in Atlanta. He gives his birthday, and we do an event here in Atlanta that we just did at Illuminarium Experience this past January to celebrate Nique's birthday, to celebrate inclusion and accessibility. And they're a partner. Illuminarium Experience is a partner of ours here in Georgia. So that's just one example. We've got an event we're doing in New York. We just got done doing, we had back-to-back with Super Bowl. We're on site at the Super Bowl with our sensory room trailer, our blow-up, blimp that we talked about, that. The venue has a sensory room, so we're active at Super Bowl. We were just at the NBA All-Star game.
That's a brand new venue, though. So I have to imagine the newer the venue, the more likely they have to have these rooms and be able to build it out. Because it's not cheap to put up aside an area and build it. So the newer the venue, the more
it becomes part of the
likely.
construction, which is what was done here locally with State Farm. How I got introduced to them with the Hawks. But, we also recognize some of those iconic buildings that, are not renovating or don't have the space.
Yeah.
So we've got pods now. We just launched this in a new arena, in T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, speaking of Vegas. They just put some pods in their concourse, and we just did a ribbon cutting ceremony there. Again, Dominique, given his time, flew out, did the ribbon cutting signing, met some folks, shook some hands, talked about the impact Culture City's making, but to be there to thank them, to be part of this community. And that's really how we've grown, is it's the ambassadors of seeing what we do in communities and saying we need to do this here, wherever you are. Whether that's in another market, whether that's with a family member that you've visited, whether that's a zoo, whether that's, going to a restaurant, and that's how this has grown.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's look at Atlanta and college football, and you got the, obviously the museum and everything here. Do those type of things help expand it, because then
Yes.
you have the aquarium and you got World Coca-Cola and all that. And I would just think that having these events and having all these attractions that we have, they start to interrelate.
You're right, because the freaking aquarium on a Saturday afternoon is more crowded than the Hawks
Yeah.
game. So
Well,
I
exactly.
completely agree. I mean, I'm just saying that is if that is a
College Football Hall of Fame would do things at the the playoffs, and then how does that relate to everything else that's right
Makes
around
sense.
here
That's a
that's
good
an
question.
I love the
attraction year
venues you were
round?
talking about, because you mentioned our partners,
Okay.
which I love. And you mentioned one. If anyone from Coca-Cola is listening right now, please reach out. We are not partnered with Coca-Cola Museum, the World of Coke.
Yeah.
But yes, College Football Hall of Fame, we're going to get there at some point.
Okay.
College Football Hall of Fame is, the Georgia Aquarium is. As a matter of fact, Dominique dedicated the room to the Century Room in his mom's name.
That's great.
As well as one of the stars with wrestling, Brandy Rhodes. Brandy Rhodes was part of that ribbon cutting, and her and
Neat.
Cody were there, and we dedicated the room to Brandy and Neek's mom. So if you get a chance to go to the Georgia Aquarium, check it out. It's upstairs. It's beautiful. Everyone I take on a tour when I worked for State Farm Arena, I would bring them in a sensory room. They're like, oh my gosh, how do I get this in my office? It's like a yoga studio.
Yeah.
It's super calming. It's super incredible. The experience really is, that's the whole idea, is to bring the distraction down, to bring the overwhelming response from that output coming at them in the environment, to really calm that down. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's just
but thanks
neat
for
to
mentioning our
see-
partners, Trip.
Yeah,
I love it.
I mean, I just like I said, all of a sudden, going back to diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
we think about
That's right.
all the things around us, and it doesn't have to be the biggest venues, or it doesn't have to be the one time,
There you
right? It's the things that every day that we're having these, let's call it encounters, and
And it's
there's people
so
there.
palpable. You can see the results of your work, and there are
you go.
so many charities and events. You never get to see the outcome of what you're
Well,
doing,
that's
because
the
you're
best
trying
part.
to cure a
Nick,
disease. and
that's
there's
the
so
best
much money.
part.
You get to see it. People in that
Yeah.
room, you get to see the look on people's faces. It's got to be
I
rewarding.
love that you said that.
Yeah.
And that I don't want to say that's the difference, but it really is the difference. There's a couple things. One is we represent several groups. There's a lot of great organizations doing good work, and they're single focused for a good purpose. What I love about Culture City, the many things, is we're talking about multiple groups who are affected by sensory needs that have an invisible disability, and it's super important. But the other part of it is, the fact that you're right. You get to see the expression on them coming into. There's a tangible ability about this that you get to see every day when you
Even when
experience
a
it
room
working
is
at a
built,
venue.
when you see a room built there, I mean, the dedication. I can't imagine how. Oh my God, we accomplished this. And it's so hard to say with certain.
Well, and you see the smile coming in, and you see the smile when they're leaving, versus the example you gave of someone crying, screaming in tears, and having to, be, I hate to say dragged, but escorted out with, their
was me.
parent.
That was
right?
me with my son Jack, and that's real, and that happens at a lot of venues. And there's two things I want to hit on. You touched on it. It only happens one time. Well, if you own a venue, you don't want it to happen that one time. That's the difference, because they're all hyper focused on
and it brings down
fan
everybody
experience.
else's experience also.
They don't want to go
And
back.
it shouldn't.
They
but
don't want
it
to go
does.
back. They label
Right.
it, and they're like, I can't do that. I can't go to the zoo because I had that bad experience at name the venue.
Yeah, so
I
we're-
can't go to the aquarium.
No, those are such great points, and we want to dive into that in the last segment when we come back. And we're fortunate to have Dan Vasquenza with Culture City joining us, and you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.
What are your plans for your business this year? Hey, it's Tug. Do you want to expand and grow? Aren't you exhausted by going to lenders, building a relationship, and a week later, you got a new person to deal with? You have to start all over again? You don't have that with First Liberty Building and Loan. The Frost family has been helping businesses grow since the 90s, and they want to know you. Unlike big banks, they want to partner with you. The Frost family knows the patterns. They know the ebbs and flows. They know business. Get to know them at firstlibertyga.com. Building a building, buying a franchise, expanding. Reach out to them. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them and if they're a fit for you. You do that at firstlibertyga.com. And by the way, if you're a young banker and want to work with a team that is faith-friendly and has a culture of excellence, First Liberty might be a good match. Reach out to them today. First Liberty Building and Loan. firstlibertyga.com. That's firstlibertyga.com.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here with Dan Vasquenza from Culture City. you're just doing amazing things. And so, we've talked through about everything that you're doing, and then all your advisors, your partners, your board members. What advice, because there's so many, I'm sure, nonprofits listening, how do you go about marketing? How do you go about thinking about, there's a point where you have to raise money, right? And I think a lot of people try to figure out how to do that well. And what have you learned from your, not only Culture City, but from your experience in business and just in the Atlanta community?
Well, first of all, don't give me all the credit. We've got some amazing people, including Michelle and Dr. Julian, who are the co-founders of Culture City based out of Birmingham, Alabama. You mentioned the board members. There's so many people making the good work happen. And so I want to recognize that for sure. But, from a marketing standpoint, it's, this is going to sound a little odd, but we don't go that route. We don't say, well, how can we market this? How can we, I don't want to use the word take advantage, but how can we now create some more momentum from a marketing standpoint? It happens. There's a need. We find the right partners. They get it. We work together. And I think what happens by doing that, by going 1+1 and doing that together on what is your need, how can we help, let us serve that, it starts to build your village.
Yeah.
And once you start building your village, you get advocacy.
Again, that's you
get
start slow,
folks starting
but then
to
you
talk
get that,
about you.
Yeah.
This is how this has grown for us. It's not us making calls to venues. It's, hey, did you see what they're doing in Salt Lake City? Have you seen what they did in Cleveland with the Cavaliers? Did you see what happened at the Super Bowl? And that's how things start to, you were talking earlier about a growth in this trajectory. And that's really how it's done. It's not us getting a chance to do this, which I'm incredibly thankful for, to come speak. This is rare, but I think that's the answer to the question is, how do you identify a need? What is your nonprofit serve that will attach to that need? How do you get that partner to work with you so you can organically grow that village? And this thing will just take off.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. And I think, let me reframe the question, because I think in the field that I'm in mass media, in a position of influence, we reach a couple million people a year. It is a position of influence. Any mass media really is. This company gets approached 6 times a week by somebody who has some pitch as to how we should help them. Okay. And we have been I was taught very young that the best way to handle that thing is, it is better for me to support 2 or 3 than 300. The station's resources, the company's resources are better to 2 or 3 big ones than it is to all these little ones. Any company should be that way. But one of the things I've come to realize is, if you can have the conversation early and say, look, man, I don't want to be rude, but what is in it for me? Because if you get that part of the conversation out of the way early, it is much easier to have a real conversation. So I'll give you an example. We started a golf tournament for veterans with the Warrior Alliance downstairs. Okay, I had that conversation on minute 1. We raised $50,000 in an inaugural golf tournament for the Warrior Alliance, because that conversation led to, this is what you're doing, this is what I'm doing, these are the check boxes, here we're going to go, how are we going to do this together? If I had not had this conversation, we wouldn't have had that conversation until after the event was done. So what I ask you is, how do you, when you approach people, what advice do you have for nonprofits who are looking to deal with media and partners, of how they interact, and how could they do a better job, because they're not doing a good job of getting the resources they could, because I think they're going about it wrong.
Mark does great work, by the way. And I think, to piggyback on what you said, you can't be, an inch deep and a mile wide with 300 nonprofits. It's 1 or 2. The best example of that is Ronald McDonald House. They get to say no, and people are cool with it. But look what the Ronald McDonald House has done. That is a great example of what nonprofits should be doing. We're fortunate enough, because we've got a lot of assets throughout the world now, where we can say, hey, why don't we, again, approved by venue, approved by partner, can we collaborate? And I think that's where the marketing starts to come in, is we're at a point now where we've got assets all over the globe and we are making an impact. How can we work together to tell that story, and who would want to be a part of that? So I think my advice would be, if you are part of a nonprofit, what do you do exceptionally well? What's the one thing you're really good at, and who are you impacting? And it might not be a lot of people, and that's okay, because it's going to grow. But once you define that, then you can go, okay, well, who would want to be a part of this? Who could plus this? Who would want to see the work our volunteers are doing, giving up their time, putting their energy in, and then approach it that way to say, hey, media partner, hey, business, here's what I know about you. Here's where I think there's a gap, and we can help each other. What do you think?
And I think your story of, there's probably more people than you think that have similar experiences, and then you start to find the data and you realize, so narrow down and really, work on that, extrapolate that, and don't try to be all things to all people.
Well, and let me go one further, okay? Because sometimes this is as simple as, okay, so you have corporate sponsors, okay? I have an asset of which costs money, okay? So what's the easy way to do this? Well, introduce me to a corporate sponsor and let them underwrite the program in which you're doing on this radio station, because I can't commit for-profit resources to a cause and leave money on the table. This is just how business works, right? So what you're going to get is the scraps from every party every time. If you can say, hey, we're going to do this tournament together. Here's a chance for you to make some money, get a good name. You'll get all this PR. If you could say, I have this client who wants to go, and they will advertise and underwrite the cost here. Nobody has those conversations. You have to drag them out of people. And until you do that, that's more what I'm talking about is there's mutual benefit in everything, right? If we're all of a sudden doing an event and I can have Dominique at my event, there's value in there. I understand said value. But most of these people that we're talking to are not talking about the value they bring to us. They're asking what we can do for them. And I believe there's an outlet as a radio station. We have a public charter. We have to do good for society. But I think it is an old way of doing business that is biting a lot of these companies in the ass. And I think that's why you see a lot of these fundraisings look desperate right now. And it has changed quickly.
There are some that are doing a really good job. And I think as you were talking, Nick, I can't help but think about two dots and how they get connected from A to B. And that's the problem. They look one-dimensional and go, well, they have that, and we should be a part of that. You should look from A to B and go, what do they do? What do they need? Where's the gap? What do we do that's so well that we can help fulfill that, but yet they're going to do a service for us? Because at the end of the day, nonprofit wants two things only: awareness and funding. That's it. Then they can operate. So your lineage is very simple. Your partners is very dimensional. How do you create that synergy that's going to excel them, that's going to help you, and now is going to create that village? So now everyone's going to want to be a part of it. Everyone's going to want to talk about you. Everyone's going to say, at the end of the day, it's an experience. I had a great experience.
And it's hard to make a broad answer because everyone's path and to connect those lines is different. However, if you're approaching these conversations, thinking about it just from side A, like any business transaction, you're done for. If I approach it like, I need this person to run radio spots, and that's the end of it, not how we're going to partner together, it's over. Business has changed
Look
immensely.
how our business has changed. This is going 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's go 30 years ago. The traditional way of growing your revenue was what? How did you grow revenue?
Yeah, you advertised. There's 8 places total, not 3,000. That's it.
Yeah, that's exactly it now. Yeah. So, what has happened in the media business is a great example of how you want to look at all businesses and how you want to look at what you do, because it's very easy. Awareness, raise funds. All the other partners are so dimensional. You want to attach yourself to that, but make sure when you're attaching, there is a gap, there is a need, there is a serve, there is aligned values, there is an experience. I mean, we can go on and on.
We talk a lot about leverage, right? And so is there leverage for both parties? And that's really what you want.
Good word.
Yeah.
Right? And if you've got that, then you can get to your point. Yeah. And if there's no leverage, there's not a connection, there's not an alignment.
And I
you're
love
not gonna
leverage.
Get that.
Don't say leverage because it sounds like a dirty word. Like, it sounds like you're trying to gain one up on something.
No, but that's the point. Is there's mutual leverage in what's going on
with leverage.
Right.
You negotiate with leverage. If you're in different sides of a negotiation, no one's going to win the negotiation. You have to use leverage to negotiate. I completely agree with that. Yeah. And I think, man, we talked about a lot, but what a great way to end this, because this is palpable. If you're listening, these are tools that you can use to help your business, everything, but we apply different principles. The principles of nonprofit marketing are the same as a business, a for-profit business.
Absolutely.
Stop acting like it's a different thing. Speak a normal language that people speak, and you will be exponentially more rewarded.
100%. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks, Dan Vasquenza from Kulture City, for joining us. And you've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be back next week.
Is this the year you want to grow your business? Do you want to expand your team? Build a new office? Hey, it's Tug, and I want to tell you about First Liberty Building and Loan. Aren't you exhausted by going to lenders, building a relationship, and a week later, you're dealing with a new person? You won't have to with First Liberty Building and Loan. The Frost family has been helping businesses grow since the 90s, and they can help you too. They know the patterns, they know the ebbs and flows, and they know business. Now the Frost family wants to know you. FirstLibertyGA.com. Buying a building, building a building, buying a franchise, or expanding. Reach out and spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them and if they're a fit for you. FirstLibertyGA.com. By the way, if you're a young banker and you want to work with a team that's faith-friendly with a culture of excellence, First Liberty might be a good match. Reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan at FirstLibertyGA.com. That's firstlibertyga.com.